Wilfredo Gomez, before facing Salvador Sanchez, was known for his undefeated record. This made him the favorite of many and led him to speak a few words too many in some interviews. Salvador Sanchez, on the other hand, was known for saying what was necessary and never losing his humility. He had better arguments to give, his fists. And on a night where nothing went as expected, he was able to prove it. Join us in reliving one of the most memorable fights in the history of both fighters, where one demonstrated his incredible resilience, while the other showcased his immense strength from the moment the first round bell rang and turned into a beast in the style of Mike Tyson. With an enthusiastic song, it was announced that Wilfredo had entered the ring. It seemed like a political campaign, but what he didn't imagine was that night, he wouldn't be the candidate who would secure victory. Originally, the fight was planned to have 15 rounds. It was a unique event, and many people gathered in the audience and in their homes to enjoy the spectacle. Suddenly, in the audience, a group of people began to approach the ring, and the classic mariachi music could be heard announcing that Salvador was now in the arena. The crowd had gone wild, having very high expectations for what was about to happen that night. But none of them were prepared for the events they were about to witness. The announcer further heightened the excitement of the audience, introducing Wilfredo as the fighter who had never been defeated before. So, for everyone, this was a significant challenge that Salvador had to overcome. Face to face, both looked energetic. In fact, they had a striking physical resemblance, but only one of them would leave the ring that night, keeping their reputation intact. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first round, and Wilfredo was the first to try his luck and throw a combination of feeler punches. But this would mean nothing. As the round progressed, a violent exchange of blows began. Salvador and Wilfredo were in close combat, and when Wilfredo tried to escape the situation, he dropped his guard, and Salvador seized the opportunity to send him to the canvas.
Su mandíbula, levantado el guante derecho, Wilfredo Gomez, que pronosticó una victoria por nocaut en el octavo episodio. Ahí entró fuerte la derecha y a la gana se va Wilfredo.
The audience had gone wild. None could believe that Wilfredo had fallen so quickly. This only served to boost Salvador's confidence. Once the fight resumed, Salvador became 3 times more aggressive. Now he knew the power of his punches against an opponent who had never been defeated and was determined to be the first to show him the taste of defeat. He managed to corner Wilfredo and delivered a significant series of headshots. Gomez would break free and return to the center of the ring, only to keep retreating enough to hit the ropes and receive more perfectly placed blows from Salvador. You could see Wilfredo's attempts to attack, but Salvador's counterattack was stronger. He had found a gap in Gomez's defense and was landing all his punches there. Gomez used his footwork to move around the ring, but it occasionally worked against him when he ran out of space and found himself against Salvador's fists and the ropes. Once again, against the corner, Salvador landed a hook to Wilfredo's face that made the announcers exclaim, "Oh, he's down." But falling toward Sanchez's body, he managed to stay on his feet. Wilfredo was throwing punches into thin air, while Salvador connected all his punches to his upper body, at the very least. It was something we didn't expect to see, the commentators remarked. A massacre was happening, and it was only the first round. The bell rang, ending the first round, and anyone could state the obvious: Wilfredo had endured those last seconds by lunging at Salvador's body. Now he had only one thing he could do: go to his corner, listen to his team, rethink his strategy, and come out with a different attitude. On the other hand, Salvador returned to his corner like a champion. If the first round defined everything, he had won the fight. But if he truly wanted recognition, he knew he had a lot more work to do. The bell rang to start the second round, and Salvador was the first to come out of his corner. Gomez tried to find an opening in Sanchez's defense, but his fists were too wide open, which allowed Salvador to continue landing punches on his face. By chance, Salvador ended up against the ropes. But the situation was very different from when Wilfredo was there. Sanchez kept attacking actively, so Gomez had no choice but to go for his body, hoping the referee would separate them. For a few seconds, you could see a different perspective of Wilfredo. But it faded when Salvador decided to attack him.
Aunque tiene ya inflamado el pómulo derecho. Entra a la derecha y la izquierda y otra vez repiqueteando.
Gomez's strategy was simple: don't get cornered or against the ropes again. And he managed to turn the fight around. Wilfredo took Salvador to a corner he was already familiar with from the previous round and started an exchange of punches that had everyone in the arena on their feet. The aggressive back and forth had returned, and it could end badly for either of them. Fortunately, Salvador was not afraid to face Wilfredo, so he managed to get out of that terrible situation with his fists, to which Gomez responded by throwing his body in an attempt to hold him back, but the referee separated them, and they returned to the center of the ring. The audience cheered Mexico in support of Salvador. But by the end of the second round, Wilfredo had made it clear that he still had a lot to give and that he wouldn't give up the fight. From this point on, either of them could become the champion.
De derecha y de izquierda de parte de Salvador Sanchez. Ahí cambiando metralla los dos y también Wilfredo Gomez.
The fight continued, and both fighters demonstrated great qualities in the ring. Salvador was agile with his fists, and Wilfredo had great resistance to them. This ensured that exciting moments were not lacking in the rest of the rounds, but as the fight progressed, it became clear who would emerge as the winner and who was only delaying their defeat. It was one of those moments in sports where you wonder as a spectator if it's really worth being in the ring taking punches, but for Wilfredo, nothing was decided until he couldn't raise his fists anymore. Unfortunately for him, what motivated him was a challenge to Salvador. So, not long after, he made sure to leave Wilfredo lying on the canvas. By the end of the seventh round, Salvador was alone in his corner, calm, with fewer visible injuries, watching as Wilfredo was attended to by his entire team, trying to heal the wounds he had suffered, and with a clearly disfigured and swollen face from all the punches he had received.
En Montreal el 20 de junio del año pasado. Ahí los dos cambiando metralla en la esquina de Wilfredo Gomez.
They no longer looked alike at all, and Salvador was sending a clear message. He was telling Wilfredo, "I'm here, waiting to defeat you." Despite his obvious physical deterioration, Wilfredo entered the eighth round trying to land good body shots on Salvador, pushing him against the ropes a couple of times. The audience chanted his last name, but it was clear that his movements were not as fast or agile as they were at the beginning of the fight, which allowed Salvador to continue landing punches on his body.
Derecho bárbaro también conectado por Salvador, y cuando suelta las manos Salvador domina la escena.
With Wilfredo against the ropes, Salvador managed to land his punches on what had been his favorite target throughout the fight, Gomez's face. It was a combination of blows so brutal that Wilfredo's fists dropped, and his entire body almost fell out of the ring. The audience went wild. There was nothing more to be done. Wilfredo tried to get up as the referee counted, but when he looked into his eyes, it was clear he had nothing left. Wilfredo Gomez managed to stand up, but he was not in a condition to continue the fight. Salvador celebrated with his team like a true champion, with only slightly swollen cheekbones, while he had left Wilfredo almost unrecognizable. In the post-fight interview, Salvador was told that he had come close to defeating Wilfredo in that explosive first round and that Gomez had only escaped defeat by the miracle of the bell saving him. However, the same interviewer claimed that this miracle had been worse for Wilfredo since he had received more punches in that fight than in his entire career. Everyone wanted to congratulate Salvador and asserted that in the sport, the winner is the one who lands punches, not the one who talks. Salvador stated that Wilfredo hadn't managed to hurt him with any of his punches, but he had felt the weight of his fists. He also said that he wasn't surprised that he had hurt Wilfredo in the first round, as he had prepared to give it his all from the very beginning. For obvious reasons, Wilfredo was not able to give a single interview. The Salvador Sanchez vs. Wilfredo Gomez fight serves as an example of the important phrase uttered at the time: in boxing, the one who lands punches wins, not the one who talks. While everyone expected an explosive fight, no one imagined that Salvador Sanchez would take away Wilfredo's undefeated record, almost winning in the first round. While Wilfredo deserves recognition for enduring another 7 rounds after being hurt, the damage to his body may not have been worth enduring. What did you think of this performance by the great Mexican warrior? Do you agree with what was said that night, that Wilfredo never had a chance, or could the victory really have gone to either of them? We'll read your comments.